and gentlemen, today, amidst this gathering of legal luminaries, judges, esteemed lawyers, and all our loved ones, I take great pride in inviting you all to our book launch of The Defaulter's Paradise Lost, Demystifying the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016, authored by Mr. Anant Merathia, well-known member in our legal community and my respected and esteemed senior. This book's pages are enriched with wisdom drawn from all his previous experience and cases. Thank you so much for making it to the event. Without further ado, I would also like to introduce the master of ceremony for today, Mr. Sanjay Pinto, who has graciously accepted our request and come to the event. Before donning the black gown as an advocate in the Madras High Court, where he specializes in media, criminal, constitutional, corporate, arbitration, and consumer cases, Mr. Sanjay Pinto was the resident editor of NDTV 24/7 and the executive editor of NDTV The Hindu, and also a former debating champion with a record 106 victories in intercollegiate debates. Mr. Sanjay wears many hats. Apart from being an advocate, he's also a legal columnist in the Deccan Chronicle with a record of over 306 published legal columns till date. He's also an author of 4 books, High End Law, My NDTV Days, Justice for All, and Speakers Are Made, Not Born. Thank you so much, sir, for coming here. I humbly request you to take over the proceedings. Thank you.
Good evening, legal luminaries, ladies and gentlemen. An empty seat was the signature fixture in all boardroom meetings of retail giant Amazon. That empty seat was not to showcase a habitual absentee. That empty seat was a reminder of what the focus should be, the consumer. And every decision made in Amazon, I'm told, keeps the customer as the centerpiece. Anant Merathia's masterpiece on the IBC law is arguably a tell-it-like-it-is commentary on what this legislation hopes to achieve by making all relevant stakeholders part of the furniture, as it were, as opposed to what critics often believed was palace intrigue of an official liquidator. So without much ado, ladies and gentlemen, may I request the dignitaries, first the star of this evening, Anant Merathia. And I always believe, ladies and gentlemen, that especially your first book launch is like a wedding reception. One feels like a bridegroom all over again, with the same wife, I must add, Anant Merathia. And his mentor, Mr. Arvind Pandian, senior advocate, Honorable Justice Senthil Kumar Ramamurthy, Shri Sanjeev Jain, and Honorable Dr. T.K. Vishwanathan to please take your seats. No empty seats on this stage here. Welcome, sir. Welcome, sir. I don't know how many of you would have noticed it. You know, what a team player this man is really. There's not a single photograph of him, of his outside there. It's only his team members. His team members have been showcased in all the social media posts. And I think our political leaders should take a cue from that. Today, you know, you'll get into trouble if one leader's photo is bigger than the other, if the font size is bigger. But this is truly a team effort, and I'm so glad to see Anant being that perfect team leader. May I request Anant to please honor the dignitaries with mementos. Purnima thanked me for graciously accepting the invitation to anchor this event. I was just wondering, because I'm conscripted to this. He is like, I'm part of the family here, really, Anant, and he was my very affectionate junior in school. Ladies and gentlemen, retired top cop friend Dr. Pradeep Philip once wrote that writing a book is like having a baby. First, you have to get pregnant with an idea. Then it has to grow within you, within your mind and soul organically. There is a gestation period. And then finally, there's also the role for a midwife. In this case, colleagues of Anant, the publisher, the designers, the editors, all those who made it happen today. So without any further ado, may I request Anant to launch, in fact, the dignitaries on the stage, to launch Anant's book, Defaulters Paradise Lost, into the Chennai literary arena. Staying with pregnancy, this won't be a cesarean operation, I'm sure, because it's not pasted too tightly here. Congratulations, Anant. My suspicion that the umbilical cord hasn't snapped between the mentor and the mentee has been confirmed today when Anant invited his senior, Mr. Arvind Pandian, who was my senior as well in school, to be here at this event. May I now request Rishi to introduce Mr. Arvind Pandian, Senior Advocate.
Thank you, sir. Mr. P.H. Aravind Pandian is a highly experienced and renowned Indian lawyer who was among the youngest in the bar to be designated as a senior counsel. He has 29 plus years of practice in the bar with core specialization in corporate law, mergers and acquisitions, insolvency and restructuring, and tax laws. He practices extensively before the Honorable NCLAT, NCLT, and the Madras High Court. He was a partner at Subbaraya Iyer Padmanabhan and Ramamani, a highly reputed tax law firm of late Mr. Ramamani. He was an eminent advocate on income tax matters. Mr. Pandian served as the Additional Advocate General of Government of Tamil Nadu for almost 8 years, spanning from March 2012 to May 2021. Sir is a specialist editor of Ramaya's The Guide of the Companies Act and also the co-author of the widely referred book, Guide to Takeovers and Mergers, published by LexisNexis and Vadva. I've had the privilege of briefing Sir for matters, and it has always been a great learning experience and also has been an absolute pleasure. I request Sir now to please take the podium for his address. Please, Sir.
Thank you, Rishi. The chief guest for the day, Honorable Justice Sendil Kumar Ramamurthy, the esteemed legal luminary, Mr. T.K. Vishwanathan, Honorable Judicial Member of the National Company Law Tribunal, Mr. Sanjeev Jain, my good friend Sanjay Pinto, I do not know what to refer to him as, my wonderful colleague, as well as also a good friend, I should say, Anant. Having heard what Sanjay started with, if this is either a cesarean or a normal one, I could take claim that I could have also been one of the mothers because he has been part of me also. So I do have a great responsibility. I would also say happiness in having been part of this lovely baby which Anant has authored. To introduce the author, which was my job for today, what I've been told. I mean, for a lawyer, we always say we have to be persistent in arguments. But persistence is actually called differently as persuasion, as what we say. Lawyers should know to persuade the judge. Persuasion starts, but unless you're persisting, you will not find I would say, the arguments being accepted by the bench. Why I'm saying so is, I did discuss with Anant. I must say a few words. You must allow me the freedom to share about you a little bit also there. So when Anant came over to my office, it was the first time, similar to what Rishi is doing now, to brief me in one matter before the erstwhile company law board. And he ended up coming almost every alternate day to brief me in that matter. I mean, the client also used him to ensure that, because he was from somewhere in Madhya Pradesh, Indore or somewhere. So he said, let me start sending all the papers. Anant was not part of my office. As he started coming, he said, sir, I would like to also see the M&A practice, so let me try to learn that area of practice also. And he started sitting with my M&A team who were handling it in High Court at that point in time and learning it. That went on for a few weeks. And then it became few months. Finally he said, sir, I've almost spent few months here. I would rather say that let me be part of this office. I don't want to go alone. And he just blended softly into the firm. I would rather not call it as a firm. Hari and myself who are running it. We ran it more like a family. And Anand so beautifully blended. And it was so helpful for me, because just as he blended, I became an additional advocate general sometime in 2012. And the whole company law board work fell on his head, because majority of the team walked with me to the High Court. Anant took over at that point in time from 2012 to about 2015 with another 3 or 5 people and managed it so efficiently. So those 4-5 years, however long he spent with me, and now I should confess, which I have not told him, he suddenly walked in one day and told me, when I was advocate general, I came back with some really bad mood, because contempt matters, so many are there. Every day we get bombed by the High Court judge that you have not done your work. So I was coming back to my office and sitting down at 6 o'clock or 6:30, he just walked into the room and said, sir, I think it's time for me to start alone. And it was like a second shock to me. He was already handling everything and suddenly comes and tells me I want to start separately. That was the first day, I must confess, I really got angry with Anant. I told him, just like that cannot leave me. I need time. And I don't think any of my other colleagues know about it also till now. So Anant then stayed for another 6 months and then ensured that he kind of smoothly handed over also to other boys, and then handled also whichever clients were so happy with him, they also went happily with him. All those briefs also he handled. So he evolved himself into such a wonderful lawyer in 10 years, I could say. Because the first time I met him was not when he walked into briefing me alone. We both had actually he was having, none of us were having a drink. A whole group was having a drink at Singapore at Clarke Quay when we went on a trip. And that was when Anant was introduced to me. 5 years later, he walked in. So that is Anant's history with me, my office, my practice, and then now I should say continuing also as a lawyer of eminence. It's more a proud event for me as much as it to Anant. As we always say, which chambers we come from, we always are proud. I'm very proud of the chambers where I come from, my mentor, where he comes from, all of us. And Anant is coming in the same way, I should say, to enjoy that, and producing this book as an author is a second stage in his life. And that, I think, is going to take him also to other places, and I'm going to be there to watch every move of his. I must thank him also for giving me this opportunity to share here and wish him all the best, including his wife who has stood by him throughout with all his, I would say, the anxieties whenever Anant goes through. I'm sure that she will stand by it along with me and other colleagues also. I wish you all the best, Anant. Thank you.
Thank you, Arvind. Told us a lot about things that we didn't know about Anant. But let me tell you something about Arvind. Arvind and his 2 brothers, in fact 4 brothers, 2 other brothers, Manoj and Vinod, were 100-meter sprinters in Don Bosco. The gold was always taken, only the silver and the bronze were up for grabs. So now, of course, he's a runaway success in his practice. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm known to be politically accurate, never politically correct. But I must put my neck on the line today and say that I strongly believe, call it an instinct or whatever, that this book will become a bestseller. This book will become a bestseller. All those who agree with me, please say aye. Having said that, please make sure you buy the book and put your money where your eyes are. Anant, I know the effort that has gone into writing this book, and we used to have these brainstorming sessions even with this team before the idea just came about. So I know the hardship, I know the effort, I know the struggle. If you could tell us, Anant, about what went into writing this book and why, and how challenging it was for you to actually simplify something as complex as the IBC.
Thank you, Munal. Thank you, Sanjay. Firstly, I'm overwhelmed. I'm honored. It's so nice when your mentor, is with you, is part of your journey, blesses you, and is there, standing beside you when you're doing even slightest of a good thing. So that's something which I take it as a huge blessing, sir. Thank you so much. I'm blessed. I'm honestly blessed. Honorable Justice Sendil Kumar Ramurthy, Honorable Dr. T.K. Vishwanathan, Honorable Justice Sanjeev Jain, the judicial member of the NCLT, the other members of Judiciary, NCLT, and CLAT, Mr. Pandian, my senior, Sanjay, a very good friend and the master of ceremony for the day, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me immense pleasure to stand here before you as the author of this book, Defaulters Paradise Lost, Demystifying the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. IBC, as we all know, is one of the few laws which brings into one common sphere various subjects such as the businesses, economy, finance, commerce, law, and possibly a lot more. The code has been the forefront of economic and financial reforms of the government of India, and it has time and again been stated that IBC was one amongst the crown jewels which was introduced by the government, along with, of course, the introduction of the GST regime. This is a law that has had significant impact on a wide range of stakeholders, right from businesses which act as trade creditors, manufacturers, suppliers, consumers, service providers, bankers, financial institutions, entrepreneurs, personal guarantors, workmen and employees, government departments, insolvency professionals as the officers of the court, so on and so forth. As new generations are taking over businesses and knowledge is becoming the most powerful tool in any sphere of life, I've noticed off late in my, at least I would say in the last 10 odd years, that a lot of mid-sized business owners, they would like to have a first-hand knowledge of the laws that they're dealing with, especially the owners who are in the age group of 35, 40, 50. And they'd like to be more informed about the legal implications of the legislations that affect their businesses than compared to the business owners who were, let's say, a few decades ago who just left it to the professionals. Also, there are a large number of professionals such as the chartered accountants, auditors, company secretaries, consultants, various finance officials, CFOs, and the like of those who handhold a lot of these companies and advise them on a day-to-day basis. It is not necessary that all of them would have the knowledge or the expert knowledge of a, I would say, subject like IBC, which is fairly complex in nature. And the management relies on these professionals, especially at a time of distress when time is short and decisions have to be taken. So that's when it dawned upon me and my team that it is practically not possible for every professional to know every area of law or such a specialist area of law. And especially something like IBC, which is both dynamic, evolving, and complex. So that's where I felt that as a fellow professional, I should endeavor along with my team to provide a book that captures the journey of this law right from its inception till somewhere about April, May 2023, with the last rounds of manuscripts are going back and forth between us and the publishers. When the design and intent of the law itself by the government is a wider inclusion of stakeholders and shareholders, in the process compared to the earlier regimes like the BIFR and the schemes in the winding up, where it was having a limited access to certain stakeholders, why should there not be a book for every stakeholder who can pick it up, read it, understand what the law is, and therefore we embarked on this journey. I must also disclose to you in all fairness that I deliver a lot of lectures at the various institutes, chartered accountant, company secretary, cost accountant institutes, chambers of commerce, and I would have almost at every session, every second or third person coming in and saying, sir, is there a simplified book for IBC? There are the larger commentaries which are there, and I would recommend them of the commentaries. But then I thought, okay, this should be a true motivation that sparked me and my members of my team, that when the audience, when there are consumers who are looking for a book which is simplified, I think we should work towards one. And therefore, we started writing a more simplified book on the IBC. It was difficult. It's a complex subject. putting it together in very simplified, lucid language was a challenge, but yes, I would say thanks to my team, we managed to do it. We believe that this book is a must for small and medium businesses, for financial institutions, NBFCs, semi-organized businesses, for universities, both law and business. Today, law, business have converged. You cannot have one independent of the other. And therefore, as much as this book would be helpful to a NLU, it would be helpful to the IIMs and the other management business schools. And in the libraries of course, even foreign lawyers who are trying to familiarize themselves with IBC, with the kind of cross-border work that's happening in India and across. I would say this without humility, that this would be a great read for anyone trying to understand the corporate insolvency regime and the landscape in India at the very ground level. We've not discussed only about the larger cases which get the media attention, but also cases of the SMEs, the small and mid-sized cases. It would be beneficial for students, it would be beneficial for the professors in business, law, commerce, and it gives a holistic understanding to law students and those who are new to this subject to start off understanding this so that it is not an overwhelming or it's not an intimidating subject. Moreover, we are confident that this book will be of a great assistance to professionals who practice IBC on a day in, day out basis. Finally, I'd like to say that Defaulters Paradise Lost is not just a book, but it's a progressive initiative that we've taken to empower all concerned stakeholders impacted by this dynamic and complex legislation. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being there. Thank you.
Thank you, Anant. Congratulations again. I've always believed that spreading legal awareness should become one of our fundamental duties under Article 51A of the Constitution, and I think Anant has already set the ball rolling with that. May I now request Ranga to please introduce Sri Sanjeev Jain.
Honorable Justice Sanjeev Jain. Sanjeev Jain joined in the Delhi Judicial Services in 1992. He was later promoted to the Delhi Judicial Services in 2006. He worked in various capacities in the Indian judiciary, presiding as a metropolitan magistrate, civil judge, special judge of NDPS, and special judge of CBI. He also worked as a registrar judicial in Supreme Court of India. He was superannuated from the post of district judge commercial in 2022. As a special judge of CBI, he decided bank fraud, asset disproportionate cases, and cases of a politician who was involved in an illegal possession of an helicopter. He decided narcotics cases, arbitration and commercial cases involving food adulteration, divorce, and custody matters, including claims in road accident cases. He has now been appointed as the member judicial of the National Company Law Tribunal, Chennai, on 4/1/2023, and is currently presiding over 2 benches at the NCLT, Chennai. I request your lordships to address the gathering.
Namaskar. Honorable Mr. Justice Senthil Kumar Ramamurthy, Learned Dr. T.K. Vishwanathan, Chairman Bankruptcy Law Reforms Committee, Learned Senior Advocate Sri Arvind Pandian, the hero of this show, Sri Anant Merathia. Good evening to all, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me an immense pleasure to share the dais with all the legal luminaries who have gathered here for the release of the book authored by Sri Anant Merathia titled Defaulters Paradise Lost, Demystifying the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Court. First of all, I congratulate and commend Sri Anant Merathia for his meticulous research, insightful analysis, and his effort in publishing a comprehensive analysis on the IBC. It will serve as a great invaluable guide for the professionals by providing them with a thorough understanding of nuances of CIRP and liquidation. Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code is an important reform of our country in relation to corporate governance. Since its inception, IBC acted as a catalyst in acceleration of Indian economy, and its effective operationalization has improved India's ranking in the World Bank's ease of doing business. IBC emerged as a life-sustaining legislation which provides a new lifeline to revive and resolve a company which is in distress. The soul of the IBC is resolution of a company in distress by collective effort to keep it as a going concern, to maximize the value of its assets, to balance the interests of all the stakeholders. The author of this book has extensively dealt with the same by segregating them chapter-wise. As a prelude, this book deals with the previous regimes of insolvency laws prevailing in India, core the economic activities and intent behind legislating the present IBC. This book also deals with the interests of all the stakeholders under IBC, financial creditors, operational creditors, statutory creditors, implies an impact of amendment and judicial developments which the court has undergone in the last 6.5 years. The book further seeks to address the issues relating to insolvency, process of personal guarantors, which is still at the nascent stage in India. Further, the author has put in an immense effort so as to explain why the pre-pack insolvency resolution process for MSMEs was introduced under IBC and how we should take it forward for its effective implementation. Another important facet which this book deals with is the interstate dispute between the COC and the RP. This is one of the major issues which affect the insolvency process, the insolvency resolution process, which the author has highlighted in the present book. The author of this book has also dealt with the issues faced by the successful resolution applicant in the course of giving a resolution plan for a distressed corporate debtor. The author has meticulously dealt with the issue of whether an asset reconstruction company can be a resolution applicant and also emphasis on the principle of clean slate theory. I am sure that this book will definitely guide us through the intricacies of insolvency laws and empower us to navigate the challenges of financial distress with wisdom and acumen. To all the readers, seasoned professionals, aspiring practitioners and curious minds alike, I wish the author of the book, Mr. Anant Merathia, a great success. Let me say, when I joined in February here, I was not having much knowledge about IBC and company law. But after joining this, I had a fear whether I will be able to justify my service or work here. But I got a very much cooperation from the bar. And now, after a period of 6 months, I can also say that I know something about IBC and company law. Thank you very much for the cooperation given. And I must also say that in my career, I also thought 2 times to write a book, but every time I left. I definitely congratulate Anant Merathia because now he has achieved a very big goal, and this goal must be achieved by all, because in judiciary or everywhere, after the service, when you retire after the service, nothing happens. But if you have written a book, book is always seen by everyone. I congratulate Anant Merathia ji and his team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for showering encomiums on lawman for the layman. One thing I liked about Anand's book is that it calls a spade a spade. Like, for instance, if you look at the Consumer Protection Act, there's not a slip, but a huge crater between legislative intent and practice. Consumer Protection Act is meant to resolve disputes within 3 to 5 months, but a single adjournment to the National Commission is 8 months. And I'm fighting a case which is like in 2011 still going on. Hopefully the IBC will not go that way, because there's a lot of legitimate criticism, constructive criticism of the functioning of tribunals in our country. May I now request Divya to give us an insight into the glorious professional journey of Dr. T.K. Vishwanathan.
Good evening, everyone. Dr. T.K. Vishwanath is a legal luminary who has held various positions in the academia, Government of India, and in the Lok Sabha. During the 4 decades of his career, he has served as a lawyer, as a professor of jurisprudence, and as a secretary to the Government of India in the Ministry of Law and Justice, and as a secretary in the Lok Sabha. He has been instrumental in drafting many legislations which include the Information Technology Act, the Competition Act, and the Right to Information Act over the past 2 decades, which has helped the government in immense ways. He was awarded the esteemed Padma Shri Award in 2017. As the chairman of the Bankruptcy Law Reforms Committee 2014, he was responsible for drafting of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016, which is the most economic important reform undertaken by the government, next only to the GST since independence. Dr. T.K. Vishwanath was the consultant to the former president, Ms. Sri Pranab Mukherjee, and is also presently the director in the Pranab Mukherjee Foundation. He is presently the chairperson of the expert committee that examines the workings of the arbitration law and as well as recommends reforms in the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. He is also the member of the Insolvency Law Committee constituted by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. It is my honor and privilege to invite Dr. T.K. Vishwanath to the dais.
Justice Senthil Ramamurthy, Justice Sanjay Jain, Arvind Pandian, Sanjay Pinto, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know where do I begin because this is a homecoming for me. I started my career as a law teacher, law and books, then moved on to law and the making, drafting of laws. Then I moved over as a law secretary, as a law in action, and then ultimately to Parliament as Secretary General, and then ultimately as advisor to President. So I've seen law from 360 degrees. Now, before starting my interaction, I would refer to what Sanjay Pinto referred to vacant seats. I used to teach a subject, all of you know, is jurisprudence, not a very interesting subject. In the Madras Law College 5 decades ago, in the huge gallery of 100 students, it's very difficult to maintain a minimum in my class. But my colleagues who used to teach criminal law had a packed audience. Many of my students will migrate there. Who was interested in listening to Hofeldian jural relations in Kelson Pure PLF? Now, that was textbook jurisprudence. Upendra Bakshi once told us, you should liberate Indian jurisprudence from the yokes of patronized jurisprudence and sermonized jurisprudence. You count Indian jurisprudence, but that has never taken off. That has never been taken off for various reasons. I wish I will come back, if my God permits and health, will return to teaching of jurisprudence, which can be made very interesting. It can be very interesting because each law I made laid down a new jurisprudence, each law. The drafting, legislative drafting was my profession. It was a profession which no man would opt for because it's a kind of a priesthood. It's very taxing. You don't learn by learning any textbook. It has to be by practice. It is really a very difficult profession, but it is really a learning experience. I have drafted many legislation, not one, different types of legislation. My duty is to hold the mirror before the policy maker and try to translate that into a legislative action. In the course of time, you develop the expertise, and it's very interesting. You learn many things. During my tenure of 25 years in the government, in various capacities, I had the opportunity to amend the Constitution 10 times. Constitution is a different type of a document. You don't amend the Constitution the way you amend an Act of Parliament. It is a very different type of law. One day you do a criminal law, another day it's a constitutional amendment, sometimes Information Technology Act, which laid the foundation of a new jurisprudence, Right to Information Act, that I drafted. So Competition Act, it was laying down a new jurisprudence because when the state is withdrawing from many of the paternalistic role it has assumed and liberalization, it is withdrawing from market forces are taking over, you need there is a constitutional void. So that constitutional void has to be filled up by competition law. So we find new laws are coming into being. These are all something. Since he referred to vacant seats, I digressed and I'll start my interaction. Now, law is a very interesting subject, all of you know. In the relationship between law and social change is summarized by Wolfgang Friedman in his book Law and Social Change. He said the controversy between those who believe law should be a determined agent in the creation of new norms and law should follow the social norms is one of the recurring themes of history of legal thought. He was referring to Bentham and Savigny's approach. But today, law and changes are moving so fast, and economics, it is going to be very difficult. For example, what is the relationship between law and economics? Now, I will quote from what the Dean of the Stanford Law School said about law and economics. She said, in the beginning there is only law, then came law and society, law and history, law and economics, and so on. These developments have transformed the vocation of the legal scholar from that of a priest to that of a theologian. What has happened? We live in an age where knowledge is spreading so fast. It's simply exploding. Simply exploding is simply mind-boggling. It's not merely internet. It has gone beyond that. Even as when I was the advisor as a law secretary, we found that it is very difficult to keep pace with the challenges. Overnight, your knowledge has become obsolete. Things are happening so fast. Textbooks of no use to you. Textbooks will not tell you because they come after you have done. We had to respond instantaneously, and I always had that. We have to be on your feet because you will have to answer questions on the phone to your political masters. Political masters, they'll ask you, and you can't say, I will refer back and get back to you, you're lost. Your currency is gone. You have to answer. SWOT answers. How does it mean? You have to continuously be moving on, learning what will be the crisis, what will be the possibilities. Today you see in the papers, Parliament session has been called. Immediately ask, what is the reason? What for? One nation, one vote. What is it? Have you know? What is the thing? What does it mean? You have to be ready. You have to be ready. So, even judges, overnight your knowledge is going out of being. Attempting a book, Anant, I will congratulate him. It is not an ordinary book like a black letter law where there is a section and a commentaries on the section. I have drafted legislation, an act of parliament. None of you would have read an act of parliament from top to bottom because it is not a very interesting piece of document, but it is something which is very opaque. It is not possible to understand unless you are trained. Judges deal with particular sections and they don't go, there is no need to go into the other sections. But an act of parliament has to be read as a whole because we draft from the top to the bottom. And as a draftsman, I knew from the beginning to the end, I own responsibility for the formatting, comma, full stop, everything, because it changes the meaning. So that has given me a lot of expertise in this area. Now coming back to this insolvency and bankruptcy code, this code was handed over to me sometime in 2014 by the then Finance Minister Arun Jaitley, who was my law minister 2 decades ago. So he had great faith in my drafting skills. I did many legislations during that time. He said, Mr. Anand, I have 2 attempts we have made to reform the credit market. We were not successful. You try your luck. I said, I took it upon myself, and everybody was skeptical. I said, what are you going to do? You have to amend so many things. You are thinking of a single law for the entire bankruptcy. It's not going to happen. And moreover, your parliament is always dysfunctional. What is that you are doing? We moved, we came out. Fortunately, everything moved by divine grace and everything was in place. So this law is a unique law in the sense, I have been in the Law Commission for 3.5 years as a member secretary. The research, law reform and law research in India lacks funds, data. We were doing only doctrinal research. Reform of law was based upon accidents of litigation, and then occasionally where the public outcry, politicians think you have to bring a new law. That happens. But then that is not the way you attempt a legal reform. We need to have empirical data, impact analysis, and without data, you cannot amend the law. So we always felt handicapped by lack of data. How do you validate the validity of a law or the legality of the law? How far it is observed? Law and action studies. So when we conceived this IBC, we tried to provide all these things. We changed the basis of jurisprudence from debtor in possession to creditor in possession. Everything was controversial and contentious still. Then from inability, from net worth erosion to inability to pay. So then we moved on to so many new concepts, experimenting, and this has led to a lot of heartburn for the simple reason the credit market was not ready. People were not ready. It took some time. The most important thing about this insolvency and bankruptcy code is an ecosystem. When a law is enacted, you need to have an ecosystem to support the legislation. Indian Penal Code, we have only the police, and other legislations simply don't have an ecosystem to enforce the law. It is enacted and is left to the courts to see when a litigation arises and handle them. Systematic law reform has never been for any legislation other than your Income Tax Act and customs revenue laws where government's interests are imbued. They have data because they have data at hand to know which subject will generate what revenue, what will be the loss. They have data on the way. Now we have GST here. No other law except IBC. IBC has data now. Why you are criticizing IBC? It's a failure. I would say, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code is a jewel in the Indian statute book. It is a jewel because it has an ecosystem. We have data at hand, and you are able to judge how far the cases are progressed, so you are able to criticize the act. Tell me which act of parliament you have data. You don't have data about any other legislation. We collect data, we continuously monitor. We have the information utilities, we have the bankruptcy board, and continuously the ministry is monitoring the changes, and we attempted quick responses, some out of the way. For example, the flat owners, we made them financial creditors. It was criticized. But then there is a social issue. The parliament had to do that. All said and done, this act is an act which is going to change the credit scenario. And textbooks do not tell you anything. When Anant approached me for writing a foreword, I wanted to read the book. He gave me the book. The most important thing I'll read out, what is this, in the chapter 4, he talks about data. I've always been throwing up this idea, we need data to attempt any law reform. In the Arbitration Act, right now I'm working on it, we have data, and we have come up with strange results. Why? In spite of the best attempts made to reform the Arbitration Act, India has not become a hub of international arbitration. Chandru is here, he will tell me, he is a part of that system. Why you have not become? We imposed this unilateral model law, one law for the entire country, that you got into an entanglement. That is the cause of a problem. We are not still finding, we have the best legal trains, best judges, best legal lawyers. Still, we go to Singapore to arbitrate. Why should it be? So we'll deal with that. Now, this big data, which Anant refers in his book, he says in chapter 14, the science of statistics as the chief instrument through which the progress of civilization is now measured, and by which its development hereafter will be largely controlled. In a similar vein, the measurement of growth of any new legislation, including the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, can best be gauged by the data and statistics compiled and maintained by the requisite depositories and data banks of the Government of India. You will find more and more data is flowing into the government system, more where tax defaults, credit information. So you are in a position by a touch of the button to understand where you can reform, what is the problem. We live in a time when the capital searches for a global returns. They will flee by a touch of the button. Your share markets are very volatile. It happens in some part of the globe, you are finding the impact here. So this book is a welcome book. It should be like a handbook for everyone to understand. People should read this before criticizing the IBC, because this is bound to create a very good, healthy credit market. We have not touched the personal insolvency for the simple reason we wanted jurisprudence to evolve slowly. It's evolving, it has come up. Because when I testified before the parliamentary committee, I was the first person to testify. They asked me, you are creating a new professional, resolution professional. From where are you going to get them? Are you going to get them from the sky? I said, professional emerge. No, it is emerged. It is emerged. There are a lot of course, every profession has its black sheep, but then it has to emerge. And youngsters are doing great. And I was very happy to see in many of these conferences, in Bombay or other places, more and more girls and ladies are getting into this. It's a happy occasion for our country, for more and more ladies are getting into the legal profession. They're very active, very brilliant. They're very brilliant. And I leave with a parting shot. Many of the legislations attempted have become the Act of Parliament. Some have been criticized, etc. But the one thing which attached in 1996 is still to become a reality. That was an amendment to the Constitution to give 33% reservation for women. I drafted that legislation, but then it has never been enacted for the simple reason. Political parties, all of them have in their manifesto to introduce and bring effect to this 33% reservation. They'll bring it routinely, they'll come and introduce the bill, and with the dissolution of the parliament, it will lapse. It has not been seen the reality, but that is the day when our country will prosper. I congratulate Mr. Anant for his great effort, and I know I have written 2 books. The amount of matrimonial time he would have taken, I have gone through that process. So I congratulate his wife for the patience in which she has put up with him. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. What a wealth of information. And I just couldn't help noticing something. Despite having drafted so many laws, the discipline, that I think young lawyers can make do with, sir still took the bare act onto the podium. That's something that I didn't fail to notice. Ladies and gentlemen, George Bernard Shaw once wrote a letter to his friend. He said, I'm writing a long letter to you because I don't have the time to write a short one. The way Anant has actually condensed such a complex subject into a book of this size is certainly laudable. I now request Purnima to unveil another highlight of this evening to give us a bird's eye view of the giant legal strides of our chief guest, the erudite, suave and dignified His Lordship, Mr. Senthil Kumar Ramamurthy, and also to request him to set his silver tongue in motion.
Justice Senthil Kumar Ramamurthy was elevated as a judge of the Madras High Court in February 2019. Prior thereto, he headed the Chennai office of Dua Associates between June 2001 and February 2019. His areas of specialization were commercial and corporate litigation, arbitration, and corporate transactional and advisory services. He was awarded a Chevening Scholarship in Commercial and Corporate Law by the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office in 1998. As a Chevening Scholar, he had studied in the College of Law, York, and interned at Simmons & Simmons Solicitors, London. He holds a bachelor's and master's degree in law from the University of Madras. I humbly request your lordships to kindly address the gathering. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Dr. T.K. Vishwanathan spoke about his days as a teacher at the Madras Law College. He said he taught jurisprudence and that, he was at a considerable disadvantage because most students weren't interested in jurisprudence and they were interested only in criminal law. I must say that I was one of his students of jurisprudence, and this was in the mid-1980s in the Government Law College, Madras. And sir, I must say your efforts were not entirely wasted. I mean, you still left, quite an indelible imprint with, your lectures on Hofeldian analysis. You spoke to us about the, I remember the Hart-Fuller debates, Rawls' theory of justice. all of that left an imprint for sure. Justice Jain, I met him for the first time this evening. He's somebody who's seen the judiciary at all levels. And he very candidly and in all humility said that he had not dealt with the IBC prior to his assuming office here. But I must tell you, for the most part, I'm quite envious of my colleagues who've come from, service, who've seen the judiciary at all levels. The kind of exposure they have is tremendous and, should never be underestimated. So as the principal actor, as far as the implementation of the IBC is concerned, I'm sure he's going to play a very big role in ensuring that this law is implemented successfully. Mr. Arvind Pandian, all of you know him as, a very successful senior advocate. But what I'd like to mention about him is that he is one of the few seniors in the Chennai bar who've actually managed to very successfully mentor a large number of young lawyers, each of whom is very successful today. And Mr. Anant Merathia is just one of them. I don't want to run you through all of them, but I must say there are a good number of very successful lawyers who've, emerged from his tutelage. Mr. Sanjay Pinto, I've often enjoyed, listening to him when he was a reporter with the NDTV and thereafter as an editor as well. I've also had the opportunity of having him up here before me a few times. So I'm quite happy that, to be on the dais with all of them. Turning to, the topic for today, the title of the book, Defaulter's Paradise, it takes my mind back again to a different time. Those of a certain vintage in this audience will remember the days of the Sikh Industrial Companies Act, 1985. So that is the closest parallel to this legislation in as much as it was the only legislation previously which dealt with rehabilitation of Sikh companies. For the most part, the legislation was abused. And, be it lawyers, auditors, all of us played a role in that. If you will recall, under Section 15 of that statute, the board of directors were under an obligation to make a reference once the net worth of the company becomes negative. And, most of us know that the profits of a company are often a matter of opinion. So every time a company wanted to make a reference, the financial statement would be tailored to make that reference, and the primary motive usually was to fall back on Section 22 of the SICA, by which we could defend any proceedings for recovery, winding up, execution, even proceedings against guarantors could be defended. So this was the sort of historical context. And then the law continued to evolve. Most of you will know how in the early 90s, the Recovery of Debts and Bankruptcy Act came into force. Now this was again an act that came into force in response to a specific challenge. The challenge being that bank debts could not be recovered through the civil court system. So Parliament in its wisdom felt that if you have a specialized tribunal, then recovery of debts would be expedited. That legislation again proved to have its shortcomings. And again, Parliament decided to give secured creditors another tool. That tool was in the form of the SARFAESI Act. Of course, even today the SARFAESI Act is resorted to, not without success. I must say it has been resorted to with a fair measure of success. But what Parliament again realized was that one of the shortcomings of SARFAESI is that realization under the statute is entirely dependent on the secured assets being of sufficient value to enable a creditor to realize the dues. And this was often not the case, especially with larger accounts, because it is common knowledge that when somebody borrows, let's say 10 crore to start a business, chances are that the loan will be fully secured. On the other hand, if you have a large business house borrowing, let us say, 500 crore, it's most unlikely that the security provided to the bank or financial institution will be sufficient. So we reached a point in time where, dues, especially to public sector banks, was mounting and had reached, such massive proportions that something needed to be done. And this whole history of, dealing with the BIFR under the SICA regime, that was obviously fresh in the mind. I'm sure those are some of the reasons why the Bankruptcy Law Reforms Committee, headed by Dr. Vishwanathan, opted for a creditor-driven model when the IBC was drafted. So some of these, legislations, they arise in a specific, historical or immediate context. And the IBC has therefore provided one more tool. And as I was telling you, the difference is that with the IBC, it is possible to realize the value of the business as opposed to only the value of the assets, which is why, in most of the successful resolutions under the IBC, they were able to realize more than they would have realized by liquidating the assets. That is the biggest advantage of the IBC over the SARFAESI or any other legislation meant for reviving companies. But again, because it is dependent on the business carrying a certain value, unless the matter is taken to the IBC at a time when the company concerned has value in its business, even the IBC cannot succeed. Right? Let's say you have a software company and the company's main assets are the contracts and its human resources. If by the time you get to the IBC, the contracts have been terminated and the human resources have moved on to other companies, even this legislation will not succeed. But then, at the end of the day, we need to work with all these legislations. And, Mr. Anant Merathia's book has been targeted not only at lawyers or judges. I think the merit of the book lies in the fact that it's been targeted at all the stakeholders who need to use the IBC in some form or the other. Be it secured creditors, be it operational creditors, the insolvency resolution professionals, the COC itself. So he's actually pitched it just right. It's neither oversimplified nor is it intimidating. And it's possible for any of these stakeholders to draw considerable benefit from the book. Therefore, I have no doubt at all in my mind that the book will be a resounding success. Congratulations and all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lordship, for your eloquent keynote address. It kind of reminded me of, during the pandemic, I used to log in online and when Lordship used to sit with Chief Justice Sanjeev Banerjee. And I'm not exaggerating. It used to be a treat to watch the two of them hold forth on points of law. That I really wish Lordship's lectures could be actually recorded. I'm sure they're being recorded, but also uploaded on YouTube for a lot of young lawyers, especially, to get a glimpse into this fascinating IBC world. Anant, it's now time to convert your heartbeats into words. Let others call it a vote of thanks. But somehow the old news hound in me is still a little alive and kicking. So is there another, I know it is a work in progress. Is there something else that is brewing? Paradise regained of some sort? I'll give you a title. If you're writing something on corruption, you can call it Swindler's List. Anant?
The dignitaries on the dais, Honorable Justice Sendil Ramamurthy, Dr. T.K. Vishwanathan, Shri Sanjeev Jain, Judicial Member of the NCLT, my senior Mr. Pandian, Sanjay, thank you so much. Thanks for making this event a memorable one for me. While this will be a vote of thanks, but also there'll be a few things from my heart which would possibly flow in the process. I honestly would like to thank every single person who's present over here for joining us today, my friends, family for the support in this event, for the constant encouragement, which means to me a lot as an author. I'd like to thank every single guest. I sincerely thank Mr. Arvind Pandian, Senior Counsel, for all his guidance, and also Mr. Harishankar Mani, my relatively quieter senior, for all his guidance. Sir, the introduction from you meant a lot to me. And so just one clarification, sir. After that discussion in 2015, two things which no one knows. People don't know. One, I had tears in my eyes because that was the first time and the last time sir got angry at me. The first and last. And second, sir, I stayed on for 18 months after that, sir, not 6. 2015, Diwali we spoke. 2017, 2nd of May, you and Hari sir came and inaugurated my office. So that's how it was. I thank Sanjay Pinto, a very, very close friend, advocate, author, and a very good friend, for all his guidance, for his encouragement to the book. And otherwise, I thank all the members of the bar, both the younger members, the senior members of the bar. Thank you so much for all the warmth and the positivity. I extend my appreciation for every single person who's helped me review the manuscript. That's a little bit of an arduous task, and thank you so much for those who've reviewed the manuscript, given me their inputs, for my friends, my well-wishers who've given testimonials. I'd like to thank all of the design players for their utmost support, for all the designs, all the covers, the cover of the book, for which I was a little difficult to work with on that. It kept doing back and forth, but they gave some real good work to that. My event partner, the Bar and Bench, my publishers, Thomson Reuters, who saw the merit in my writing. Now, this was a formal part, but then there's something which is from my heart, and I'd take about 2 to 3 minutes to share something about possibly my journey of the last 10, 12 years. So, but before that, most importantly, I should honestly give this as this book is, in a way, I would say, is a tribute to my team who has stood by me across COVID. From 2018, we've been together. I've been a very tough taskmaster. I make life difficult for some of them. They get sleepless nights. But I'm thankful to each one of them for bearing the pressure with me. We managed 2 good-sized launches in Delhi and in Chennai. It wouldn't have been possible. It's their enthusiasm, their passion that runs the show, not mine. So I'm genuinely thankful to each one of them. Purnama, Rishi, Rangasai, Priyanka, Danisha, Divya, all of them. Each one of you are very special to me. Thank you so much. When I moved back from Singapore in 2009, I knew very less people in the legal fraternity, and I'd say I was blessed. I got in touch with Arvind sir as he gave the journey, and Hari sir. It was a huge cultural shift from a very fancy 7-star Singapore life, wine and dine, golf. From there coming to Mylapore, very traditional, very conventional. But one thing which I really liked about my life here, and which I always would cherish very happily, as I call that my Mylapore office, is that there was a huge human connect and a human touch with my seniors and as colleagues amongst us. I was just joking with one of my colleagues, Chopra, who was here, that the jokes that we used to crack, we all used to be so loud in the office that I'm sure it created disturbance for the others. I'd like to speak here a few words about my other senior, Mr. Harishankar Mani, a man who's behind the scene, conveniently even now sitting behind the pillar. He played a huge role in my life as a professional guide, counselor, psychologist, spiritual guide, possibly words that cannot explain. Thank you so much, sir. 2 things you put a lot of pressure on me, sir. One is to step out with you to eat, sir, which I actually enjoyed a lot. And secondly, to see Bollywood movies. We've seen the maximum number of my Bollywood movies I've seen is with my own senior at night shows. The challenge was morning I would have a CLB high pressure hearing with Arvind sir, but night we would go out for a night show movie. Those were some of our best days, sir. When I joined the office, one thing which I remember the first day of the Mailapur office when I was there full time. I had 4 or 5 colleagues, and all of them are here. Sibi, Charan, Hari Prasad sir, Chopra, they all said, boss, if you have to work with us, it was a little intimidating, college ragging kind of a thing, first thing. If you have to work with us, I was this new kid come back from Singapore, going by the book. You have to come with us every day to Sarvana Bhavan or Sangeeta for the idli in the evening or the evening snack. That became such an amazing ritual that 2009 to 2017, I think by and large every day we were there, and those were some of the really nice days. Coming back to Hari sir, 2 lines in Hindi for you sir, कि sir उड़ते सूरज को सब सलाम करते हैं sir, वो करेंगे आज भी. लेकिन जब मैं कुछ नहीं था, जब आपने उस समय जो support दिया, I am really, really thankful to you for that sir. Thank you so much sir. Thank you for being there in my life. I'd only end by saying that I've been lucky. I've had 2 seniors. One is an Amitabh Bachchan who's leading from the front, and one is a Yash Chopra who's backing me from the back and giving the directorship in my life. So thank you so much. Thank you one and all for being there. Thank you to the dignitaries. I request all of you to please join us for dinner. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Anant will now be available to sign copies of his book, and please do join us for dinner.